morning. This is Anna Patterson with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great day so far. We are going to go ahead and start our housing call. The main things we want to update you on today, of course, many of you know that the shutdown still is in progress, so it continues. SNAP has been partially restored. And we also want to remind you that we have two different campaigns open. One to restore the workforce housing loan program at the state level, and then we are still collecting housing counseling stories for a federal advocacy campaign to restore and protect housing counseling dollars. Moving right into federal updates. So the federal shutdown is approaching week 6. And after tonight, it's going to actually surpass the 2019 shutdown and become the longest shutdown in federal history. A few news sources, though, report that there have been bipartisan funding conversations in the Senate. So there seems to be a little bit of hope, or at least interest in moving things forward. For those that are tuning in or are finally, just need a refresher, Republicans need a bipartisan support in order to pass the federal budget. But there has been a lack of willingness to compromise with Democratic lawmakers who want the spending bill to include a clean extension of the Affordable Care Act, marketplace subsidies, which are set to expire at the end of this calendar year. For just insider context into what that would mean for North Carolinians, without these subsidies, the Affordable Care Act subsidies, North Carolinians who get insurance on the marketplace would pay on average $670 more per year in premiums next year. Additionally, there are several federal programs, of course, that have been affected by the shutdown. One of the ones that, again, we highlighted last week in our newsletter with a really critical blog is the SNAP program. And so as of last Friday, two federal judges actually ruled that the Trump administration could not freeze SNAP funding for more than the 42 million people who rely on it. And so yesterday, the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, announced that it's going to use the entire emergency fund it has to pay out the SNAP benefits for November. However, due to limited funding, recipients will only be receiving half the amount that they usually receive. And so again, for the North Carolina context, there are 1.4 million North Carolinians that receive SNAP, and this is about 13% of the state's population that rely on these benefits. And so a lot of folks, including our Attorney General, Jeff Jackson, and just from what I've seen in different community forums and things coming in my inbox, but also on different platforms, folks are encouraging extra support to local food pantries. And there has been a really beautiful amount of energy and momentum around making sure that people have access to food. Another program that remains stalled at the federal level is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. This remains stalled in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services because of the shutdown. And last Monday, Pennsylvania Republican Representative Brian Fitzpatrick sent a letter to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services advocating for the continuous funding of LIHEAP during the shutdown. These funds, in particular, are dispersed to states to provide assistance with utility bills. And in North Carolina, it helps provide crucial one-time payments to help older adults, people with disabilities, and families in crisis paying their heating bills. And I don't know about y'all, but you can definitely feel the temperature dropping. And so just imagine living without heat, especially in the weeks to come as it gets colder. Another program that's impacted by the shutdown is HUD rental assistance. However, what we do know right now is that HUD rental assistance will be paid through at least the end of November. And so we're continuing to keep an eye on that so that we can keep an eye on updates and on finding out when that money may run out, which would be a whole other host of issues for people's stability and their housing. We also just want to lift up that House Republicans have urged HUD to renew the current Continuum of Care awards citing the potential for significant delays in funding. So our partners over at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition released a piece on this, and they included the sign-on letter that the House Republicans sent to HUD Secretary Scott Turner. And in this letter, they really emphasized that HUD should move carefully when it's shifting its strategies on homelessness, for fear of destabilizing programs that are serving individuals with disabilities and older adults. And they highlighted that HUD's adoption of the 2-year notice of funding opportunity cycle has actually provided predictability and reduced administrative burden for grantees. Now, with this compressed timeline and the pivots and stalling and potential for delays in 2025 and the ongoing fiscal constraints, the letter really encourages and asks for the HUD secretary to make a decision to extend the current COC awards for an additional year to serve as a stable bridge as the department transitions to its next strategic phase. And this strategic phase, part of it was leaked. HUD plan was leaked earlier this year, actually a month or two ago, in a plan that showed that HUD planned to cut more than half of the 2026 funding that's designated for permanent housing projects in its COC program, and instead shift to incentivizing communities to invest in more transitional housing and treatment first approaches instead of housing first approaches. For context, 87% of COC funds ending in 2026 are designated for permanent housing projects. So this shift would mean that no community could invest more than 30% of its COC funds in proven solutions like permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and this could put almost 200,000 people at risk of experiencing homelessness. Moving on, just again, a reminder that on the federal level, on the federal advocacy side, we are collecting stories to support housing counseling and to call for the restoration and the protection of housing counseling dollars. Moving on to state updates, our WELP letter sign-on letter remains open. Just for a refresher, for the last few weeks, we've been circulating a letter to our network. I just want to say thank you. It has been really, really, for lack of a fancier word, cool to see the variety of people that are signing onto this letter. The housing ecosystem is showing up, and you can tell that this resource is extremely important for us. And so thank you to the almost 85 folks who have signed on from 30 plus organizations. And I'm really excited to see this number grow. Moving on to some state and local headlines. Just wanted to announce that last week, Governor Josh Stein proclaimed November Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Month. And in the proclamation, he made the very intentional connection between housing and homelessness and quality of life. On the legal services side, unfortunately, rural North Carolina legal aid offices are closing after the decision to freeze IOLTA funding at the General Assembly has led to stalling of really critical resources. So they will be closing offices in places like Rocky Mount and a few others in Eastern North Carolina. On the local side, for many of us, today is election day. There are no state or federal elections in North Carolina, but there are several municipalities that are holding elections. So we just want to offer up, the North Carolina State Board of Elections has a local voter tool. So if you look that up, you can find more information about any elections in your area. Want to emphasize that local elections are incredibly important. The decisions about zoning and land use and budgets and different things like that, and how communities are shaped and created and supported are happening at the local level. And so these are really, really, really crucial to the creation of preservation and creation of affordable housing. So make sure that you exercise your right to vote and make your voice heard. Last but not least, want to move on to reports, events, and resources. There is a webinar on November 5th at 1 p.m. around using data to address homelessness. And there is a national study on permanent supportive housing that will be the basis for this webinar, hosted by the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard. There's also an Advocacy 101 training by the National Alliance to End Homelessness on November 12th from 2 to 3 p.m. And then there is a interesting webinar on November 14th called Better Together, Community Voices, Hospitals, and Banks Advancing Housing and Health, hosted by the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. So all these links to these learning opportunities are in the call notes for you. We also want to lift up a few different events that are happening, in-person events. The Barton South Affordable Housing groundbreaking ceremony is happening this Thursday, November 6th at 10 a.m. on in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it used to be on Old Pineville Road, and I mentioned that for my folks from Charlotte because I know where that is. So if you know where that is, we'll include the full address in the call notes for you. But beautiful opportunity to celebrate new housing opportunity. Hope, North Carolina is having their annual Inclusive Housing Summit on November 17th at the Friday Center in Chapel Hill. The link to register will be in the call notes. It's $50 for individuals and $100 for professional level tickets. Also happening this month, the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits is having their annual conference November 19th through the 20th in Research Triangle Park. Early bird registration is $265 and will increase to $365 once those tickets are sold out. And there will be a Enterprise Faith-Based Development Initiative Summit virtually, actually, hosted by Enterprise Community Partners on December 4th from 12 to 3:30 p.m. It is absolutely insane to me that we are already talking about December. In the reports and research section, we have a lot of great pieces for those of us that really like data and research and new tools. There's a tool by the Urban Institute looking at the American Affordability Tracker and highlighting policy solutions for an affordable future. There's another piece also from the Urban Institute talking about turning data center revenues into affordable homes, so potential revenue source there. And then other pieces that look at how we can prevent climate-driven insurance discrimination. There's still things happening in the insurance space, not only premiums increasing, but we're seeing and noticing increasingly the disparities between households of color and non-households of color. There's also a piece out of the Joint Center for Housing Studies looking at the impact of lower interest rates and how that might offset the effects of high home prices. But as many of you know, this is a slow process. So the impact on home prices will not happen overnight. That's all we have for you all today. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. As always, if there's anything you want us to highlight, dive into a bit further, any questions that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll talk to you next time.